What's up, guys? Happy Monday. Hopefully everybody had a stellar weekend. We're here to talk NBA DFS, but I'll just get out my quick complaints as far as the fantasy football weekend goes. I hate when injuries affect everything, and whether we're talking overlay drafters, Draftkings, or year-long fantasy football. I definitely got some wins and some losses yesterday due to injuries. It's just so annoying when it breaks out that everybody's affected yesterday. I'm talking DFS players year-long. Just my little pet peeve for what happened yesterday. So I'm done with my whining and my crying right now. I just don't like when it affects everybody, good and bad.
It is, it sucks when that happens. My biggest takeaway from yesterday, I haven't even mentioned this to you, is Jameis Winston, man. We've talked about this guy before, but has there ever been a quarterback that is so up and down? I mean, yesterday he throws 2 picks, two defensive touchdowns for Indy, yet still throws for close to 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's one of the few quarterbacks it's really hard to get a read on him.
He's so much better at fantasy than he is in real life because all those picks come from the fact that he's not scared to turn it over. So his team loses, but he gives you big fantasy stats.
My dad's asked me last night, would you rather have Jameis Winston over Baker Mayfield? I'm like, man, it's such a hard question to answer because it really is, though. Jameis Winston's just a hard guy to put your finger on,
Yeah, no doubt about it, guys. Anyways, daily shout out to overlaydfs.com. Hopefully y'all did better at NFL yesterday than I did. Bunch of games did not work out like expected. See Texans, Broncos, for example. So hopefully you guys cleaned up, made yourselves some money. We will go through the basketball slates later when they are up today. I'm all about trying to get that $25,000 jackpot next weekend. In worst case scenario, guys, it is not impossible to win these jackpots. We're seeing people win them. I feel like if you play every single day, you should be able to make your money back if you're good at it by getting your 9 times your buy-in back. But eventually, you should maybe be able to wrap up one of those 12-0s throughout the year and make that big money. The sweat's real. It's exciting.
Yeah, hell yeah, it is.
All right, guys. So I already did my daily complaining about all the injuries yesterday. I still can't tell if it helped me or hurt me more, but I'm done with my whining for this point, guys. Let's move into our DK picks for the day. I'm going to start with Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm just going to go out on a limb this morning, guys, and tell you I expect him to be real popular at this price tag. Suns rank 5th worst against the center position, meaning they allow the 5th most points to DFS points to the centers. Cat seems way too inexpensive at 9,300 in what's projected to be the game of the night on paper for DFS. This is, to me, is what I just assume will be chalk talk throughout the day. Karl Anthony Towns will probably get a lot of love in this matchup at this price. I look at him, to me, as a cash game staple. However, I do think there are some intriguing reasons to consider the GPP fade. Now, I normally only run one lineup these days, and so it's usually going to be a cash and a GPP lineup. I'll probably go here. I figure the upside's real in this spot, and the floor is at least decent. But if you're looking for a reason to fade him in GPPs, one, we saw it last week. Mondays sometimes just work out weird the day after the weekend. Also, he's on the tail end of a hard-fought back-to-back against LA yesterday. Spent the day trying to deal with AD ineffectively. Night off or big game yesterday. Now they got to play again today. So if you're looking for fading him, it's not the worst day to try to get lucky in a situation like that.
So when you first mentioned Towns to me, I looked at the slate last night, but I was going to message you back this morning and say, Towns, that's an interesting one from you because I know you don't normally love him on the road, don't normally love back-to-backs. But then you just look at his price tag, man, and it is really hard to get away from him here. I love your points about, the fade in GPPs, Mondays work out weird, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest thing that I want to add on there, he doesn't look great right now. I know that he was questionable a couple games ago. He ended up playing that game and he played last night. Sure, he'll play tonight, and he's been fine, but he hasn't been amazing. That being said, man, if he were 11K here, I think we'd be like, okay, it wouldn't be any crazy price at all. He's $1,000 cheaper than he's been. It's tough because we talk all the time. In baseball, we talk about this. If a guy is, 10K, or if a guy is 9K and, people are rushing to roster him, but they wouldn't be at 10K, is that really the right move? Well, it's different in basketball, right? Because Towns just has so much upside in this matchup on this price.
Yeah, again, this is on paper the DFS game of the night. I think it's almost difficult to argue that one. Highest total by a decent amount, projected to be close. Couple of relatively even teams out in the Western Conference in my eyes. So I locked Towns in for cash games, although it's still difficult, like you're saying, not to play him in GPPs, but I do think there are other centers you could take a look at. I know there's a guy you like, and there's also another one we'll go through on members only. So
that is the big reason I think for fading him. Sorry, but just we'll get into it here, is because there are other centers. And center is the one position on Draftkings that you really don't have a lot of options. You can only roster 2 max.
All right. So again, if you're looking for a lower owned center, I'm going to assume that your boy MARC GASOL that you want to talk about is going to be really low owned.
So you got me on the center versus the Bulls thing. You mentioned it. I've been bad against centers all year, but we harped on it like last week or the week before, and I have been riding this out big time. Chicago played the Heat yesterday. Bam was about 8K and came in at 8% owned. He dominated. I don't expect a Bam-like performance from Gasol, but he's just rock solid here at 4,800. Again, the Bulls are getting absolutely destroyed inside. It's a nice bounce-back spot for Toronto after losing yesterday. They've actually lost 3 in a row. I love them in this spot. Gasol has actually been good on back-to-backs. As much as I hate to say it, well, I actually love to say it. He's a cog in the machine type of play at this price, man. I expect, somewhere around 6X in this spot. I think this is a spot where Toronto takes out their frustrations. Of course, he's not a must here, and in cash games, Towns is the priority, but I think you can look at him at utility there. I think you can look at him as a pivot off Towns in tournaments. What's your take?
It's not a guy that I was looking at. I do tend to look at big men against Chicago. I'm not a MARC GASOL fan, so we've talked about this in great length the last couple of weeks, how we all get these positions in our mind about guys we like or don't like. But if you look through the MARC GASOL game log, it is highly replicable. He's got like 2 bad games over the past 10, with logical reasons behind him. I think one was against Orlando when the final score was like 2-1, so there just was no DFS points. And then yesterday, trying to deal with Joel Embiid, obviously not a great spot. And Philly's, again, a top-tier defensive team, so there is that going for it as well. I would say that it is possible Toronto takes a guy out today.
Sure.
I don't know who it would be. They played a big game yesterday, and Chicago's an inferior opponent. So double check for that, but that could open up real DFS value. And the other point here is we don't know all the value plays at this point in the morning. Now we have to get up videos so people can watch them. And then normally, we'll deal with the write-ups for late pivots and things like that. Gasol's a guy at 4,800 that if a bunch of value comes out, his price point tends to get ignored. But a lot of days, those chalk plays could end up being fool's gold. So sometimes it's better to pay up an extra 500,000 for a cheaper guy that you at least know is, in a decent game, plays 25, 30 minutes.
That's another point that you've harped on, seems like since I first started, we first started together years ago. And that's a lot of times, especially in NBA DFS, like the value that comes out as the day goes on is really good value and you have to play it. But not all the time. And just because value is there early in the day doesn't make it any worse as the day goes on. Now, Gasol is in 3K, so he's not an example of that. But you're right, at 4,800, we don't know what type of value we're going to get as the day goes on, and he's someone to look at for sure.
Think about Emmanuel Mudiay the other day when Mike Conley wasn't playing. And, I think he was still 50% owned or something like that in cash games, even though he wasn't starting. Now, it was hard to prepare for that because it was a later game. There wasn't a lot of pivots later on in the day. But he was still big time chalk. But there was no guarantee he was going to play bigger minutes. You saw him insert jingly Joe Ingles into the starting lineup. I think Mudiay played all of 5 minutes, and like half of those were in like at the end of the game when it didn't even matter. Like at least with Gasol, yes, he's 1,500 more than a guy like that. But that if this game remains semi-competitive, he could easily play 30 minutes.
I really struggle, and you don't want this score here, but I really struggle to see him getting like under 20 DK points,
Sure, it happens rarely. This is not the spot where you expect it to happen.
No.
All right, moving on down the list. So I'm going to double up picks from the game that I like, which is Minnesota Phoenix. Again, I'm not going to be alone in liking this game. All you have to do is go over and check out your Vegas odds, see the high totals, see the close game, know the pace of play, know these two teams are not elite defensively. And it's a pretty common sense game to take a look at. So if you're looking for reasons to be different, it's Monday. But for me, for my one lineup, I do want a piece or two of this game, starting with Karl Anthony Towns. Next up is going to be Ricky Rubio. Minnesota allows the 3rd most DFS points for the point guard position. This is a kind of an up-tempo pace game with less than stellar D. It's exactly the type of game where Ricky Rubio can show upside. I think the biggest factor in Ricky Rubio's lack of success consistently at the DFS game is sometimes he does have a tendency to get hurt, and then his minutes kind of stagger up and down. Well, right now, he's not hurt, and he's been playing bigger minutes, making him a very, very safe play most nights. He's played 36-plus minutes in 3 of 4. The game he didn't was because there was a little bit of a discrepancy in the point total. This is kind of a pace game where he tends to succeed. I wish you could play him at more than just the point guard, but you can't. That's fine. I'm good using him, and there's another point guard we're going to bring up right now as well. That's what the guard position is there for. This game has a lot of appeal DFS-wise, and he's the second piece I'm looking at, and there's probably going to be 3 or 4 total that I'm really considering.
There's definitely pieces from this game I'm looking at. You brought up the 2 pieces that I was thinking and I'm looking at hard this morning. I like Rubio a lot here. It was between Rubio and the guard that we are about to bring up for who I wanted to mention to you this morning.
All right, guys. So, again, it's solid play. It's a pace game. That's where Rubio is good.
Mm-hmm.
And the other point guard we're going to talk through is Kyle Lowry. And I think this one, very similar to Karl Anthony Towns, kind of seems like a pricing error. You know, he's been back for 3 games now. He's played 38-plus minutes in all of them. I wasn't even really thinking about it when you said a vent the frustration type of game against Chicago. But dude's got 38.75 to 45 DK points in all 3 games. Chicago's actually been decent against point guards this year, but like I'm still like I almost feel like that's just not right. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's because they're getting dominated inside so much. I feel like that's probably gonna taper off a little bit as the season progresses. And Lowry just seems way too low cost at 6,800.
One more point for you that maybe you're not sure of yet, but I'm surprised if you are. You haven't brought up it yet. Fred VanVleet left the game really early yesterday after 10 minutes with like a sprained knee. I highly doubt he plays today. So while I think Lowry is fine if VanVleet plays, if he doesn't play, I mean, that just got to make you like him even more, right?
www.duh.com.
Yeah, so I mean, again, VanVleet left after 10 minutes yesterday, never returned. He was ruled out like immediately. I know he's questionable today. I just can't see them pushing him here. It's a point you make.
That's a bad sign for Day, especially against a bad team like Chicago.
What'd you say?
I said that's a bad sign for him playing today, especially against a bad team like Chicago, and there's no reason to force him in there.
Exactly. I struggle to see him playing again. I don't know how his knee is feeling, but Lowry was rock solid even with VanVleet playing. Without him, in a vent your frustration kind of game here, I mean, you're right. It does like match up with Karl Anthony Towns. His price is just about $1,000 too cheap.
Yeah, and again, there'll be other pieces from Toronto then that you may want to be taking a looking at from a wing perspective, and we'll talk through all those in members only.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Thumbs up is always appreciated. We will see you guys for some more videos throughout the day, talking a little NFL, maybe some overlay and drafters, whatever we have time to get into. Appreciate y'all watching. Have a wonderful Monday.
Thanks, guys.